Welcome to what is probably going to be my favorite lesson that we do in this entire course, and that is integrating with OpenAI. We're going to do our first API call from our Bubble application and display information from a third-party app, OpenAI. Let's get right into our index page because I just can't wait to show you how this works. There could be a whole course over just using OpenAI and integrating with AI and their models, but this is a Bubble course, so we can't go too in depth with OpenAI, even though I would love to do so at some point. So let's stick on our index page. Now, what do we need to make this happen? Well, three things. We need a button for the user to submit, an input field, and then a text box to display the response. So let's drag a group, of course, over to our index. Then inside, we're simply going to have an input field. So we'll just select our input. And then we'll select a text where the response is going to be shown. Then we'll have a button. Let's change the text really quick to submit. Now, to display the AI's response, I'm going to set up a state variable. So let's select our group. We'll come to Edit, come up to our eye icon, and then we'll add a new state. We'll call this AI response. And we'll give it a state type of text. We can go ahead and create that. We can leave the default value as is. And then in our text box, we want to display that state variable, whatever it is. So we can select our parent element, which is going to be that group A. And then you'll see you have the custom state AI's response. And that's what we want to display in our text box. Great. So that's set up. The next thing we would do is add our workflow. We're not quite ready for that. Let's actually hop over to our Bubble plugins. Now, to interact with third-party APIs, we have to install Bubble's connector. So if we come up here to add plugins, you're going to see a list of plugins, which we'll cover later, kind of more on plugins. For now, just go ahead and select the API connector and install. And click Done. And then you can see this populates over here, and we can add APIs and start working with them. Now, if you click Add Another API, you're going to see all this random stuff pop up. You probably don't understand really what it is yet, but we're going to go over that, so don't worry. The first thing we should do is label our API name. We'll just say OpenAI. And then you'll see that we'll have a call. Now, this is going to be our API that we're using, the overarching API. Within that, we can have different API calls or functions or actions, however you want to describe them. But they can each perform different things and make different API calls under one API key. So let's see how that works. Well, for our API call, we're probably going to call this something like create chat or something along those lines where we can identify which call it is. Now we're going to pause here and I want to go over to OpenAI's documentation and show you how this is going to work. So we're in OpenAI's documentation, and this is what the home screen is going to look like when you log in to their platform and go to their documentation. So there's a bunch of stuff going on over here on the left side. You can see introduction, which you can read up upon how it's going to work, as well as quick starts and models. We're not going to get too in depth with this. Let's just head over to our playground. Now, the playground is actually where we're going to be creating how our AI functions. So let's go and select our chat. And right now you can see that the system is prompted to be a helpful assistant, or it's giving you that display text. Just go type it in. You are a helpful assistant. Great. That's essentially how it's going to behave. And again, if you're not familiar with ChatGPT or how OpenAI works, you can essentially prompt the system how you want it to act. You could have it act as a teacher, a writing coach, a email copy expert. Anything you can think of, you can prompt the system to do. And then you can act as the user and play around to see what kind of responses you get. We're going to skip over that customization part and go right into how to actually integrate with this. So we're going to leave all the settings how they are. We're actually just going to come up and view the code option in the top right corner. When we view that, you're going to see a bunch of gibberish show up on your screen, and we told you this was a no-code course, yet you're seeing code. Well, hold on, because we're not going to really go into depth on the code itself, but mainly the conceptualization of what's going on here and basically just copy and pasting, if I'm being honest with you. So you can see that this is the structure of the API call that we're going to use. And right now, this is a curl command. And with a curl command, we can essentially just copy this, paste it in our Bubble API connector, And it's going to format everything just exactly how we need it. Of course, if it didn't default to curl for you and you're on, say, Node.js, it's going to look different. So make sure you come to curl and just copy and paste this because we're going to be using it in just a second. Let's go back to our Bubble API connector. And in our connector, we can actually skip over all of this and come down to import another curl. So we're actually going to delete the first API call that they defined for us. So we'll delete that. And instead of adding another call, we're going to import another call from curl. And this is where you're just going to paste in your curl command that we copied over and import. And when you import, it automatically fills in all of these input fields for you, as well as the JSON that needs to be sent in order for this to work. Just like that. So easy to set up. We just need to change a few things and we should be good to go. What do we need to change? Well, right now it gives you this bearer OpenAI key, and this is just a variable. We need the actual OpenAI key here. So delete that. Let's go get our OpenAI key. We'll come back to OpenAI. We'll close out of that. Come back to our left nav bar, and let's select API keys. Now, you can see I already have a bubble test one made. It's because I filmed this twice, but that's neither here nor there. Let's create another secret key. Let's go ahead and create our bubble test 2. Create the secret key, and then we can just copy and paste whatever gets generated. Now, I'm going to delete this after the video, so don't get any ideas. We'll click done. We'll come back to our Bubble app, and then you can simply input it after bearer. So you're going to have bearer, space, and then input your API key. Once you have your API key input, you have established a connection with OpenAI. Now, there's a few things we need to change down here. For example, we don't always want to send the content as blank. We want the user to be able to dynamically input something here, and it sends as the API data. So what we would do here is insert a dynamic input or a variable. Now, to do this in Bubble, you're going to start with your little less than sign, and then you can input whatever you'd like to call the variable. For our case, we'll do user underscore input, and then go ahead and close that off with a greater than sign. And then you should see a population of your key here, which is your user input, and then a value. Now, off the bat, it's going to be private, meaning the user won't be able to see it. But we want to uncheck private and let the user input whatever they like here. But we need to initialize the call, and I always like to put something in the value when we initialize. So we can just say hi, and then we need to initialize. So let's go ahead and do that. You can see when this populates that means we have successfully called the API, and you can see in the raw data down here that we got our response, and it says, hello, how can I assist you? Now, it's important to note that when we're going to be displaying this on our front end, you want to keep in mind where this information is located. So how this data is structured is in our choices. If you scroll down to our message, you'll be able to find our content. So keep that in mind because we're going to be doing that in just a second. We'll need to find our choices, then the message within the choice, and then the content within that message. So I hope that makes sense. Let's save that. And now let's go over to our workflow. So if we come back to our design, we come to our submit button, we'll right click, we'll add a workflow. And when the user clicks submit, we want to run our action. Now, what are we running here? Well, let's see what we have available to us. If we come to plugin, you can see that nothing is here. But why is that? We just set up the whole plugin in our previous page. It should be displaying here. Well, let's type in OpenAI. You can see nothing is found still. So what's going on here? Let's go back to our plugin. If you scroll up, you can see that when we input, it says use as data as default. Now, we don't want this. We want to use it as an action, and that gives us the ability to actually interact. So every time you're making a new API, make sure you have this set to action. You're not going to be able to access it. So let's reinitialize. We'll save, and let's go back to our workflow. If we come to our plugins, you can see we now have our OpenAI curl call, and we can select that just like this. You can see our user input is already predefined. We're actually going to go ahead and get rid of that, though, and make it our dynamic variable. Before we do that, I want to touch on one thing here. You can see our API key. Now, that means a front-end user could probably gain access to our API key too if it's displaying here. So how do we prevent someone from somehow getting access to our API key? Let's close this out. Go back to our plugin page. Right now, by default, you see that these two private boxes are unchecked. We actually want to private our secret keys, and you always want to have those private. You never want to have those available to the public eye in any way, shape, or form. So make sure you check that private option. Now let's come back to our workflow, see our step. You can see that API key is now hidden. It is gone. That's exactly what we want. Now let's input our dynamic data. So this is going to be the message that gets sent to OpenAI's language model. So let's insert a dynamic data, and we'll select our input A's value as the data we're going to send. Great, so we have that, and it's now sending. Now, what else do we need to do? Well, to display, if you think back, we made that state variable called AI response. So after we send this OpenAI API call, we need to set that state variable to the response it receives. So how do we do that? Let's come to element actions. We'll set the state. Now for our element, we're going to be selecting our parent group. And for the custom state, you guessed it, we're going to select that AI response. And we're going to assign this the value of whatever gets returned by OpenAI. So how are we going to do that? Well, if you click it, you now see that we have a workflow data source, and it says result of step 1. So let's click that and see what we have. We have result of step 1. Then you see all those data fields that we previously were shown when we initialized the call. So it automatically knows that we're going to get a response and how it's getting that response and the structure of the data. So how are we going to get it? Well, you saw that we have to select our choices. So let's select our choices. Now in our choices, we're going to select the first item that gets returned. So we'll select first item, and then it said it was under message content. Let's see if that's true though. So we're going to select message content. It highlights blue, meaning that is a correct setup. For example, if we did index and did that, it highlights red, meaning that is no good. So let's select our message content, highlights blue, letting us know it should work. So now we're setting that AI response. So it should now display properly. We should, in theory, be able to go into our design, preview this, and ask ChatGPT essentially a question and get an AI's response. So let's do that. Let's go to preview. So let's type something in here. Let's say, what color is the sky? And hopefully we get a massive dopamine rush here and we get a response. Because otherwise, we're going to do some bug fixing. So let's submit. Come on. Boom. Yep, we just got a successful API call. Bubble. He gets it. We just got a successful API call. I just fucked this mic up, but we got a successful response. Now, I do want to show you a step-by-step of how we can look at this through Bubble step-by-step debugger. So let's do that. Let's type in hello. And then we'll say step-by-step, and we'll hit submit. So what happens? Let's go through the workflow a little bit. The button gets submitted, and then we run the next action. And this is our user input. So it's capturing our user input A's value, and then it says hello is equal to the value. So we're successfully getting that dynamic value input by the user. We run next. It then captures the AI response and sets our state variable. So you can see we have the result of step 1, and that's actually going to show us all the info associated with that API call. So this is everything essentially that we have access to. We could be displaying things like the prompt tokens, the total tokens used, the model that we used, and we can come to choices, and we could even display the message role, the assistant, anything and everything that gets returned in step 1, we can display everywhere. So for example, if you had an application that you wanted to track the number of tokens used by a user, you could definitely do so by accessing the usage total tokens. So that's how we can integrate with APIs. It's going to be kind of the same process no matter what the API is. There's going to be a curl command. You're going to copy and paste it. The only things that really change are the data that you're sending. So if you come back to plugin, this is really all that you're going to need to play around with. And you'll see that there's always going to be a piece of data that you're sending through the API. That piece is going to be your dynamic value that gets input by the user. So it's going to be the same process over and over and over again. Once you know how to work with one API, you're going to be an API machine. You can work with essentially all of them, especially when you have documentation. So if you were to get lost, say you come to OpenAI, and you can come and look at their documentation. So if you went to text generation, it'll show you everything associated with the text, the models you can use, the curl command that you need, and everything in detail of how it's going to work. So with the information you have now, you're able to do a whole lot more with APIs, and this is just scraping the surface. In the next couple of videos, we're going to be going over how to integrate with plugins, and I'm going to show you a bit of a different way to integrate with OpenAI. So stay tuned for that. Super cool. I'll see you in the next lesson.